Good afternoon. I know, I missed yesterday's video. I am not going to make this video longer because of that, but I also had a really long day yesterday. I got all my stuff done here, I went to work, and I stayed out until like 7:30 I got home, and then I had dinner with my husband, and then I went to sleep because I was tired. So I apologize for not posting yesterday. I really should have thought that ahead and either prepped something or, I don't know, at least mentioned it. But I didn't. But here we are. So today, on this fabulous Friday, I want to talk about having an impact. So as I've mentioned before, I did start a new job, and it has a lot to do with mentoring kids. In fact, that's what we do. So I've been going through a lot of training, and it's been amazing. Some things are reaffirming things I've already known because I've been volunteering with kids and I've gone through so many different trainings for it. So some of it is things that I've heard before. Other things, it's reaffirming things that I've kind of figured out. And then other stuff is just stuff that I either haven't heard before or never thought about. And so I've been really appreciative of this amazing opportunity that it's just opening my eyes and teaching me so much. But one of the biggest things that I feel like I'm taking away right now is impact. So we all have some form of impact in somebody's life. Whether it's a big impact or a small impact, positive or negative, you have this power in your life to impact people in some way, form, or fashion. Whether that's simply, and we've all heard the stories, somebody opened the door for someone and they were having a bad day, and that small act of kindness just kind of made them feel a little better. And it's kind of a small thing, but it might change somebody's whole day or a whole week. You never know. Or those kids that are like emptying out their lockers because they can't find reason to keep going, so they're kind of taking care of things, and then this kid comes up to them and is the sweetest and becomes a really great friend, and they decide not to commit suicide because one person just said, hey, let's be friends. And it feels like a small impact to just, this kid seems cool, let's be friends. And you find out later it changed their whole life. So I've kind of known a little bit about this, but I'm starting to figure out kind of all the different kinds and a lot more about it. So we run a mentorship program that has a lot of different ways you can help and different things like that, but we all kind of try to teach them how much of an impact they have on them. And we also go the extra mile of, if you can't continue mentoring, we try to make sure that if there's going to be a breakup, then we can make sure it's going to be not something that negatively impacts them. And so that kind of got me thinking about all of the people who have positive and negative impacts on my life. So there's people like my parents who've had such a positive impact on my life, and I always talk about how amazing my mother is because she went above and beyond to schedule our days as kids. And then I don't really talk about it as frequently, but I should, how amazing my dad is because he's taught me so much on just the basics of how to be an adult, how to take care of my car, how to kind of put together bills, and all the responsible stuff. And how he was very, very clear how big a responsibility pets are. And so I knew what I was doing when I got her, more or less. I didn't expect her to fart as much as she did when I first got her. But we all have this impact in somebody's life. And I only ever really think about positive impact in people's lives. But, and I've mentioned it before, I had a lot of really hard months recently. Lots of things happening, and I really felt like I was under attack. And so that kind of made me realize how big of an impact they had on my life, even though it wasn't positive, it was a negative impact. And maybe impacts that other people have had, and coming to terms whether I think it's positive or negative. So, and it's something that my mom always says I needs to work on, but here I am, same person. I've always been a really trusting person, and I've always wanted to kind of be everybody's friend and try to be a friend to everybody. And so that kind of leaves me open and vulnerable to other people taking advantage of me, or other people just not caring as much as I do, and thusly they can hurt me. And it didn't become quite as blaringly obvious until recently because it really hadn't. I mean, I'm aware that other people might not always like who I am. As I've mentioned, I'm not everyone's cup of tea. but I hadn't quite felt as abused and kind of hurt as I had a few months ago. And so I didn't really think about it. I'm like, I mean, I've been hurt before. Let's just let it go. And starting this new job, I've realized I've kind of started off a little closed off. Like, I don't really want to get friends with anybody. I don't really want to be buddy-buddy. I'm kind of like dragging my feet to go spend time with other people when that didn't used to be the case. And so that got me thinking, as we're talking about impacts, these people impacted me negatively. They changed my life, not for the better. And that's something that I have to cope with and deal with the same way a positive impact is. It's just a little bit easier to do it with a positive impact, 'cause it's usually good things. But I have to acknowledge this wasn't a good thing and figure out how to grow past it. And so that made me really think about the kind of impact that I have in other people's lives, because whether we know it or not, we can have positive or negative impacts in other people's life, whether or not we intend it. So just as easily as sharing a smile or becoming somebody's friend or sitting with somebody who didn't have somebody to sit with can have a big positive impact on somebody. Being a little grouchy that day, cutting somebody off in traffic, or just kind of being snappy with somebody can have just as big a negative impact. And we don't always think about it, because some days, and we're all guilty of it, we have a little bit of a self-centered attitude. We have a tendency to look out for number one and make sure that me and mine are okay. But we really have to look further than that. And I think that's something that some of the little bit of the newer generation has really come together for, and I see it a lot now. They're boycotting companies who don't uphold some of the same ideals. One of the really big ones that I've heard more recently is Chick-fil-A. And I'm not gonna lie, I love Chick-fil-A. I really do. They got great food. And they're always known for having amazing customer service and being really sweet and taking care of their people. However, more recently it's come to light, or at least we've made it known, that they donate a lot of money to organizations who use kind of archaic and not really good methods of... Okay, I have no way nice to say it, and I'm really trying hard here, if you can tell. They still do, and I'm trying to remember the correct terminology now. It's called reverse something therapy, and I'm trying to remember, and I'm going to blank out really hard, and I might have to Google search this after this and post it after that, but essentially, they are funding organizations who are publicly known to be using methods like that essentially fall under sexual abuse to try to change the sexual orientation of people. There's also the whole medical side of it and the hypnotizing, and it's whenever we think about these things, I almost had it and I thought about it and I lost it. And the best way I can describe it, because I try not to think about it too much, is the only other time that I remember being like kind of exposed to this was in a TV show as a bad thing. Yet here are people doing these sorts of things. In American Horror Story, there is a scene where there's a therapist who is trying to change the sexual orientation of one of the characters. So she is a lesbian, and they want to make her straight in that she likes men now, so that she can leave the asylum. Yes, at the end of the whole thing, there's a bunch of plot twists, and he ends up not being a great person, but he uses... I'm still trying really bad to like remember what the term is, and it'll come up later, but he's showing videos of females, sexual images of females, and then like giving her doses of a medication that makes her sick. So she gets a negative reaction to women, and then tries to follow it up with images of men, and then giving her more positive feedback. But she can't. And she has a hard time with it, and it was a really hard scene to watch because it just seems so cruel. So anyway, organizations still do this, and they were found out recently. Chick-fil-A found out recently that Chick-fil-A was donating money to these kinds of organizations. Now, I have not looked into it myself, so if you want to link information below, you can. But what a lot of people have decided to do is that they are boycotting them. Now, this isn't going to change what they're going to do. This isn't going to, suddenly flip the switch, because I'm sure there's still going to be a lot of people who either don't care, don't know, or think that it's okay. But my point is, these people saw an issue that they did not agree with and wanted to do something about. And they don't necessarily have the tools and resources to go up to the people who decide where this money goes and have a conversation with them. Or talk to the CEOs of Chick-fil-A and be like, hey, let's have a conversation where your money is going and the kinds of things you're supporting. So they did what they could, which is boycotting them. And whether or not this catches steam or it really does anything isn't the point. The point is that they are trying to make a positive impact in people's lives. Because we know by research that this form of therapy doesn't work. It's just cruel. It leaves people with PTSD and suicidal tendencies because it's such a traumatic experience. So that's one example of a really big positive impact that people can have by just doing something small. And I'm sure it started with somebody and they shouted from the rooftops and a lot of people joined in. The same way that can happen, we can have a negative impact on people. So when 9/11 happened, there was, all of this fear, and people use this to push a racist agenda against Muslims. And this comes up in my timeline memories, my feed, every year around this time, that there were a lot of kids and families that were impacted by this negatively because of this sort of propaganda. Because there was one story that I always remember because it breaks my heart, and it's this little girl said, my mom died after 9/11 because somebody thought that she needed to answer for something that extremists did with her life. This was saying that her and her family are of the Muslim faith, and somebody who didn't care whether or not they were radical or even terrorists, they were just a family. They saw that they were different and decided that they needed to answer for the things that other people did. And that is a big impact that is negative on somebody's life. So just as easily as we can have positive impact, we can have negative impact. So keeping all of this in mind, we really need to put forth that extra effort to make sure that everything we do, we're leaving positive impacts for the people in our lives. So when we're having a bad day, be aware of it. And I had a coworker this morning who was like, if I'm a little snippy this morning, it's because I've been on the phone all day with the insurance company and this and that, and she's having some issues. So she kind of let us know ahead of time that it's nothing personal. She's just kind of not in the best headspace. And so if something were to happen, which it didn't, she was sweet all day, we'd feel more like, oh, well, it's not really anything we did. She's just not in a good mood today. And allowed us to be more aware and more sympathetic, versus if she had snapped or something had happened, we might have all taken it really personally, like, is this something I did? I didn't mean to upset her, and so on. So that's one way we can do it. We can make people more aware, like, if we're having a bad day, say, hey, I don't mean to be rude, or I've seen some really funny shirts that, like, I haven't had my coffee this morning, so approach at your own risk kind of shirts. And it's really funny, but it can get a point across. And so we can try really hard to try to make more awareness around the kind of impact you're leaving, so it can be positive. And then you can also consider your biases. So, especially right now where there's a lot of things going on with deportations and ICE and the police brutality against black people in certain communities and so on and so forth, let's be more aware of the things that we have, our misconceptions, our beliefs that might cause us to leave negative impacts. I know I personally am terrified of men when I'm by myself. Now, this is not to say that I just keep coming into contact with bad men. I am overly aware that if somebody were to attack me, I don't have much muscle and I'm not a really big person that I could easily defend myself. So I have a tendency to kind of be more closed off, a little bit more like got that resting bitch face and everything going, like I don't want to talk to anybody, I just want to be focused, I want to leave, I want to do this, or I can be more curt. And so I try to be aware of that and try not to spread that when I go places, because I completely understand that it's not everybody. And there are still plenty of good men in the world, and I know a lot of them who are really great people, and that's an issue that I have. So I try to let people know, hey, I'm a little nervous, it's not you, it's just, I'm hyper aware all the time. I'm like, don't give me rapey vibes. And I try to make a joke out of it to try to ease the situation a little bit. And it's something that I do because I don't want to negatively impact somebody else's life to the point that they're like, well, why am I even going to try to be a nice guy if everybody's going to treat me like I'm a criminal? I don't want to add to that kind of problem. So I try to put that extra effort to make sure that I'm not doing that to somebody else. In the same way, they say, if a police officer is really mean to you, try not to take it out on everybody else. If a guy is really, rapey, I'm lacking my vocabulary today, it's Friday. I was going to say morning, but it's not morning. If this guy's being rapey, don't take it out on all guys, it's just one person. If you heard something on the news about a specific group of people, it doesn't mean it's everybody. Right now, there's a lot of negative stigma about Christians because there's a lot of people who are pushing very aggressive agendas against certain groups of people. And as a Christian, a Catholic Christian, I don't believe in pushing hate. I believe in pushing love. And so I'm aware that people might have that stigma against me, so I always try to address it if my faith comes up. My point in kind of talking very broadly and kind of going all over the place is impact is so important, and we all have that impact. It can be something as small as when you raise your kids, the way you treat other people is how they're going to want to treat people. My parents were always very respectful to everybody, but they were always very guarded because they wanted to make sure that they were taking care of us. And it wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but I kind of always took on the guarded side a lot more. I'm really paranoid. I can't trust anybody. And that just leads me every now and then when I meet new people, if they don't take my side or they stop inviting me to things, I immediately jump to, see, this is why I don't trust people. And that's not where we want to go. And that's not the kinds of things that we want to do. And so that's something that I have to work on. Say hi, Marble. She's very grouchy. She's trying to steal my stuff from my vanity. But when we're raising kids, we have to be aware of the things that we're teaching them, both verbally and non-verbally. When we're in front of a classroom, when we are talking to new groups of people, when we see people on the streets, let's try to be more aware of the kind of impact that we're leaving. And my ask for today is to everybody watching this video, if you've made it this far, thank you. Write in the comments something that impacted you greatly, whether it was positive, whether it was negative, just something that happened to you that changed your life. For the good, for the bad, whatever that be, so that we can kind of share with each other how much other people's impact affects our lives. So, me personally, I had a really hard time kind of acclimating to living in San Antonio by myself, and oh my goodness, I felt like I was never going to meet anybody, I was never going to make friends, and meeting my husband changed my life in so many ways because he is such a great person. He introduced me to his friends. He, every time he had something going on, he invited me and included me, and constantly reminds me you're a great person, you're all these amazing things. And he changed my life for the better in that he helped me get through some really hard times. And I don't think he realizes how much the little things mean to me. Like, when I'm having a bad day, he'll remind me that I've done so many good things. Or if I'm having a down week, he reminds me of the little things. Like, well, you had a lot of good weeks. So he's my positive impact. So what was your impact? Thanks for listening.